open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
And welcome, everybody, to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooperrider. We've got a very special 2-hour episode. I'm joined in the co-chair here by Debbie Robbins. Debbie, thank you so much.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you.
And we also have, because this is a very special episode, where we're going to go ahead and talk about the Senate race, specifically looking back on the interviews that we did here at Kentucky Voice a couple weeks ago and talking about them, but to kind of talk this out and represent both sides. We actually have some people who are at least partisan for one candidate or the other. Over on the Cameron side, we have Representative TJ Roberts. TJ, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, Andrew.
And over on the Andy Barr side of things, we have former Senate Majority Leader and State Senator Damon Thayer. Damon.
Hi, Andrew. Good morning.
I'm so used to calling you Senator Thayer. Should I just keep calling you that or Damon now?
Just call me Damon. I'm a recovering politician. So.
Well, just real quick here, a quick minute and a half we have here before the end of this segment. TJ, why are you supporting Cameron?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Daniel Cameron and I kind of have a interesting past. In 2019, I supported his primary opponent whenever he was running for Attorney General, Damon's former colleague, Will Schroeder, who's doing an excellent job in the AG's office right now. But through Daniel's tenure at the Attorney General, I saw his commitment to the entire U.S. Constitution, to the entire Kentucky Constitution, being willing to take on really tough fights that were not necessarily popular. And that's whether it's the lockdowns or free speech rights for people praying outside of abortion clinics, issues along those lines where he was willing to take a stand when government was trying to trample upon the liberties of Kentuckians. I saw Daniel out in the forefront, prayerfully, thoughtfully guiding himself in such a way to ensure that the rights of Kentuckians were protected. And through that track record, he's earned my support, he's earned my friendship, and I've been a beneficiary of that. He was one of the first people to step in to ensure that people weren't going to jail for going to church on Easter Sunday during the lockdowns. Those are just a couple of the reasons. I'm happy to get into more of his private sector work.
We'll start to dig into different things. Damon, why are you a supporter of Andy Barr?
Well, I've been a longtime supporter of Congressman Barr, and I've been with him right from the start in the Senate race because he's simply the best candidate. He's prepared to go on day one for people in our party who are concerned about what the president thinks. He's the only candidate in the race endorsed by President Trump. He's been with President Trump right from the start. He was the first person in our congressional delegation to endorse him. And indeed, he chaired his campaign in Kentucky during the last cycle. I think Congressman Barr, living here in the 6th Congressional District in Georgetown, Scott County, I know firsthand what kind of congressman he's been. He has an unbelievable constituent services operation. I lost my passport once and was getting ready to make a trip to Europe. Needed a quick turnaround that. I got a new passport in 10 days or less. I think he just really understands what it takes to serve in Congress. I think he'll be a great U.S. Senator, ready to go on day one. His position on the border has been extremely impressive. He's been endorsed by all of the pro-strong border groups. His record is unassailable. And I think he's just ready to go on day one. And I think we can't forget what he has done, Andrew. You're a fellow 6th District resident. What he's done to lock down the 6th Congressional District for Republicans. And this wasn't a guarantee. First of all, he took it away from Ben Chandler, which was a big deal, beating an incumbent. And then the Democrats came after him pretty hard, Amy McGrath with a lot of money, and there was a lot of questions about holding on to that seat. And he secured that seat and has made it a pretty good Republican seat. It's not like the 4th District, which is a safe Republican, but it is a likely Republican-leaning district, 55% plus Republican voting.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back on Kentucky's Voices special 2-hour episode where we're taking a look at the Senate race going on and looking back at some interviews we did with both of them. We have current State House Rep TJ Roberts here, who's a Cameron supporter. We have former Senate Majority Leader Damon Thayer, former state senator here in Kentucky. And of course, I'm Andrew Cooper. Sitting second chair, though, we have Debbie Robbins. One thing you brought up, Damon, in the last segment is you're talking about that winnability factor as far as it goes. And you're talking about, hey, is he the only candidate who can win the seat? Let me ask you, Debbie, you're sitting here second chair.
Yes.
Is that a factor, you think, going into the race, that winnability side of thing? Or do you think whoever wins the Republican ticket is going to be able to win it in November?
I believe that both of these gentlemen would be very competitive in the fall race. But I also believe authenticity and leadership really resonate with people. And, I kind of came out yesterday with my opinion, but I just believe authenticity is the name of the game. It's not necessarily who is doing the job. I say who wants the job, not the position. That's another thing. If they just want the position, I'm a no-go. If they want the job and they're working for it and they have a proven record as doing great work in their lives, then I look really hard.
So on that subject, one of the big things that I know have been important to several people in the race has been on kind of just debt and federal spending. I think we all would agree that a lot of issues on top of inflation and taxation, but additionally, it's kind of a national security issue. It leaves us unable to ramp up if we do have to in times of war or something like that. From when they were both on the show, we do have a point where they go ahead and discuss about spending, debt, and federal spending as far as it goes. This year's clip, clip 6 here. This is Cameron talking about the national debt. It's about 1 minute, 40 seconds long. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this one, clip 6.
A couple of different things that I've talked about. One is the REINS Act. Let me talk about both of them. The REINS Act, which is something that Senator Paul has talked about, basically reauthorizes or gives back control to Congress if an agency is going to spend $100 million or more. What that cuts down on is waste, fraud, and abuse, and it holds an agency accountable to the taxpayer dollars that are going out back into particular communities, and we need to focus on that. The other piece of legislation gets to the heart of debt is another piece of legislation that Senator Paul has, which is called the Penny Act, or as we refer to it now as the Pennies Act, given some inflation. And basically what that says is that, if for every dollar goes out, we hold back about a penny or a couple of pennies, and that effect alone will help reduce the debt and have us have a balanced budget within the next 5 years. That's a really critical piece of common sense legislation that I would support if I was in the United States Senate. It has some backing, but it needs more. Again, the REINS Act, to help us be very mindful as members of Congress of where the dollars are going. Let's reassert some of our control as folks that provide the resources and the purse strings to allow taxpayer dollars to go out. Let's take back some of our authority to make sure those dollars are being spent wisely. And then second, the Pennies Act, to pull back some of the few cents out of the dollar to make sure that, and that's agency-wide, to make sure that we're being mindful of future dollars in our children.
And on that same topic of making cuts, I wanted to play just another minute, 30 seconds of Andy Barr now talking about federal spending, federal cuts. Obviously interesting as he is a current sitting congressman. This is clip 32. And here's Andy Barr talking about just federal cuts within our federal government.
Well, I'm a member of what's called the Yellow Pages Caucus, which basically says that if the private sector can provide the service, the federal government should not. And remember, the federal government in Article 1, Section 8, it is a government of limited and defined powers, enumerated powers. The federal government should do nothing other than those few and enumerated specified powers. We need to get back to that basic idea of the original constitutional design. My good friend Jody Arrington, also a father of young kids, he is the chairman of the Budget Committee. He's one of my best friends in Congress. He talks about reversing the curse. And he was telling me the other day, the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, has identified this year alone over $500 billion, $500 billion in improper payments. We need to tackle those improper payments, fraud, waste, and abuse in government agencies to help pay for any supplemental that we plus up national defense as a result of this Iran program. I'm a member of the Doge Caucus, proud to be a member of the Doge Caucus. I voted for the rescissions package. And Jim, I am the only candidate in this U.S. Senate primary who's actually sponsored and voted for the Balanced Budget Amendment. The only candidate in this race who's voted for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which cut spending over $2 trillion, that co-sponsored the Limit Save and Growth Act, that would have reduced spending by $3 trillion.
So, Damon, you've seen those two clips back to back. How do you think they compare and contrast when it comes to the issue of the national debt and federal spending?
Well, I thought it was pretty clear. Daniel Cameron talked about bills that Rand Paul is for but has never been able to pass. And Andy Barr has talked about bills that he's voted for. And one other thing that needs to be mentioned is when he voted for the big, beautiful bill, not only did he vote to cut our taxes, but it was the largest deficit reduction act in my lifetime that we've seen the United States Congress pass. And I've known Andy Barr since he was a deputy general counsel for Governor Ernie Fletcher. I've been around this a long time, and he's a fiscal hawk, a fiscal conservative. And I think he'll continue to fight that inertia that exists in Congress to do something about federal spending. And look, I like Daniel, and I don't hold anything against Representative Roberts for supporting him. Those are good reasons for supporting him. Like Representative Roberts, I was for Will Schroeder in 2019, and I've never actually supported Daniel Cameron in a primary because I think he has liabilities as a general election candidate, and we saw that when he got thumped by Andy Beshear, who's absolutely the worst governor this Commonwealth has had during my lifetime, continues to take credit for all the good works of the Republican supermajority, and then tries to go around them with executive orders. And let's just face it, Daniel ran a terrible general election race against Andy Beshear. And I do think electability matters. I helped build the modern Republican Party here in Kentucky. All right. I started in 1995, worked my way up from treasurer of the Grant County Republican Party to Senate Majority Floor Leader for 12 years. I don't want to lose this seat. The last time a Republican lost in a general U.S. Senate race was when Wendell Ford won in 1992. And then Jim Bunning won in 98, and we've gone from strength to strength. I think Daniel would win, but I think it would be harder. And I think that Andy Barr is the stronger general election candidate.
And Representative Roberts, I mean, your response to that on federal spending and also what Damon just had to say about, electability.
Yeah, I'm going to emphasize there wasn't, in my view, much contrast between Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron. They both seem concerned about our national debt. They both are talking about the actions they look forward to taking in the U.S. Senate to ensure future generations, my generation in particular, isn't bogged down by $40 trillion of debt that has effectively denied my entire generation of the opportunity of home ownership. But what I want to point out is Daniel Cameron specifically endorsing the penny plan. It's correct. It hasn't gotten a vote yet. In my view, though, it's hard to blame Senator Paul on that, given that he's only 1/100th of 1/2 of 1/3 of the entire federal government. He needs backup. And for Daniel to come in and endorse a plan that sets in motion a balancing of the budget in 5 years, that's big for me. And that's big for Gen Z. That's big for millennials. And that's one of those reasons why I want to see the envelope get pushed further to ensure that we return to fiscal sanity in a controlled fashion, which the six-penny plan does. As to the question of electability, I am not going to disagree with the fact that Daniel Cameron lost the general election against the worst governor of my lifetime as well. And I hold no ill will toward Senator Thayer for supporting Barr in the same vein. We have to win because either Daniel Cameron or Andy Barr is far superior to the alternative. But what I do want to point out is that the first time Andy Barr ran for Congress in 2010, he lost to Ben Chandler as well. He turned that around. He learned from the errors of his 2010 campaign in order to flip that seat in 2012. And that's one of the things. Daniel has been through the fire, and he's been through a general election with a borderline royalty name of people that are considered royal families. This is going to be the first time next year in, I believe, 50 years that the last name Beshear hasn't been on a ballot. And now we are looking at a general election in an even-numbered year, which has a different electoral composition with, in my view, remarkably unimpressive Democrat opposition. I think that both candidates are electable, and it would shock me if either candidate doesn't end up getting 60% in the general.
Yeah, it's interesting you guys bring that up. I mean, the governor's race obviously looms heavy over the entire race here, obviously, as we talk about electability and everything else. We do have a clip we did ask Daniel Cameron actually about that governor's race. So when we get back here after this 2-minute break, we will go ahead and play that for you guys, that clip there, and kind of get some reaction, and also dig into as well in a common attack from Nate Morris before he dropped out against Andy Barr, was calling him Amnesty Andy and immigration. So we'll be discussing that too as well when we get back here on Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. We're taking a look at that Senate race. We're taking a look at the interviews we did with both Andy Barr, Congressman Barr, and Daniel Cameron. And one of the things, we have a few people joining us. Debbie Robbins is sitting here second chair with me. And then also we have former state senator and Kentucky state senator and Majority Leader Damon Thayer and current State House Rep TJ Roberts joining us. And one of the things, Damon Thayer's more on the side of Andy Barr and TJ Roberts is more on the side of Daniel Cameron. And one of the things that's really come up is about that governor's race, about the loss to Andy Beshear looming large. And I think in large part it has to do with the fact that, relatively speaking, when you look at least what they're saying, there is some daylight on a few issues between the two, but in rhetoric, there's really not that much. And so one of the common angles has been who has winnability. And it may even played a point into why Trump decided to endorse Andy Barr and not Daniel Cameron in the race. But we have a clip. We actually asked Daniel Cameron here, this is clip 9, about how he did in the governor's race, his reaction to it, what he learned from it. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Certainly, we worked our tails off in that governor's race, and I think the last poll in that race had us up a point, but assumed 41 to 42% turnout, and we ended up at 38% turnout, which was historically low here in Kentucky. And the other governor's races in Mississippi and Louisiana, very similar story there in terms of historically low turnout. But my commitment in this race has been to ensuring that we are building grassroots relationships across Kentucky. And I'll go anywhere and have a conversation with anybody. And, a couple of weeks ago, I was in the west end of Louisville talking to pastors and folks of faith there. And, I travel across the state. And people just want someone who cares about the issues and isn't going to be engaged in a lot of mudslinging. They're just confronting the issues that people face. When it comes to the ethics case, that's one in which, Andy Beshear and his ethics commission have weaponized that commission against me for a case in which we refunded the money and recused from the case. And it was as simple as that. Look, I don't think anybody has ever tested my or called my integrity or character into question. We've always conducted ourselves as a family, as folks that are Christ followers, and I'm a husband and a father to our 3 boys, and trying to do our best by them. But certainly, I've always tried to conduct myself in a way that reflects that relationship with Christ, and I'll continue to do that. And that's who my identity is. And, my primary responsibility on this earth is simply to be salt and light.
So we have Daniel Cameron there talking about, obviously referencing the governor's race, and then ending that by saying, hey, I'm to be salt and light. TJ, I'm going to be honest, just from an objective observer, one of the things that people have hit Cameron on and say why he lost to Andy Beshear is because he was too nice. He didn't play, quote unquote, in the mud like Andy Beshear did. He was referencing an ethics case that Andy Beshear has used to go after him. And we know that's kind of how Beshear operates. He does play dirty. And Cameron is not able to kind of deal with that because he's too nice. What do you say to voters who are worried about that?
I think Daniel Cameron learned the lessons needed. Particularly when you look to personnel being policy, he's brought on a team of people who are going to make sure that the voters of Kentucky are very well aware of Charles Booker's votes in the legislature, whether that's votes against life, votes against gun rights, votes to explode spending, the bills he's introduced. There's going to be a reckoning with how far left the modern Kentucky Democrat Party has become under Daniel Cameron, or under Andy Barr for that matter. But that's one of those things. Daniel Cameron has learned that salt and light doesn't necessarily mean avoiding uncomfortable truths. And we have seen that throughout the litigation as Attorney General. We've seen that through confronting DEI programs through the 1792 exchange that he's been doing work with. We have seen that Daniel has learned that the fact is part of being a servant leader is telling those uncomfortable truths. And beyond that as well, a lot of it is going to be campaign strategy of just making sure that voters are having those conversations with him, that you have people at the doors, ensure that they are having mobilization of the voters. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people taking that election in 2023 for granted, and I think that's a lot of the reason why these votes, the voter turnout was so low. And I think Daniel particularly learned not to take anything for granted. And that's a lesson that both have learned, as I previously mentioned. So what I look forward to seeing in the event that Daniel's the nominee is a general that is energized and is not taking any Republican vote for granted.
Damon, so one, I don't know if that has how you respond to kind of dealing with saying, hey, we've learned our lesson here, had they? But also, TJ had brought up the fact that Charles Booker is looking like he'll be the nominee on their side. One thing I have heard on the electability side of things that we're discussing here is that perhaps having a black Republican on the ballot versus a black Democrat might be better. Not for, I don't think Republicans particularly care about the skin color of a candidate, but we know that there are some Democrats out there that are, for some reason, energized by the skin color of a candidate, and perhaps they would stay home or something like that. I have heard that argument floated. How do you think that deals with electability?
I don't think it matters. I don't play race politics. I don't think you do either.
We don't.
It's the Democrats. It's the Democrats who do it.
Yeah.
But I want to give a little brief history. Okay. 2019, Daniel Cameron runs for and wins Attorney General against a much more experienced candidate who Representative Roberts and I both supported, my former state Senate colleague, Will Schroeder. We all got behind Daniel, got him elected. And the plan was he was going to run for re-election as Attorney General and then run for the U.S. Senate seat this year. But he threw a wrench in the works and ran for governor. He got the Trump endorsement. He led the field from start to finish. And then I thought ran a very weak campaign in the general. Despite the fact that he had Trump's endorsement, he had some very good minds working for him on that campaign. I just don't think he had what it took to be the Republican nominee. I think Ryan Quarles would have won that race. If I had run for governor, I think I would have beat Andy Beshear. And I'm having a hard time getting past that. He'd still be the Attorney General today and probably be the front runner to be the U.S. Senate with more experience as our Attorney General. Instead, what I'm seeing is a repeat of the same sorts of things. His fundraising is lackluster. He's not really working it as hard as the other candidates. Nobody's going to outwork Andy Barr. And I do agree with what Representative Roberts says. There's probably not a dime's worth of difference between these two guys on the issues. But let's talk about experience, electability, and battle tested. I mean, the Democrats think they have a reasonable chance of picking up control of the U.S. Senate so that they can impeach President Trump. They are going to try to spend money in Kentucky to make it competitive, to draw money off of places like Maine and other places, Georgia, North Carolina. And we need a battle-tested candidate like Andy Beshear. And I love Daniel Cameron as a person. He's a great orator. I just don't think he's the best general election candidate based on the circumstances, based on the past history of what we're going to face in the November election.
Well, when we come back, we've spent this last segment talking about a liability of Daniel Cameron's and a common attack on him. Now, attack we've seen a lot on Congressman Barr, at least from Nate Morris before he dropped out of the race, was calling Andy Barr Amnesty Andy and talking about his stance on immigration. So we will be discussing that when we get back here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider. We'll see you back here in a few short minutes.
Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you are back on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host for the day, Andrew Cooper Ryder. Sitting second chair with me is Debbie Robbins. But we haven't really been talking much. Instead, we've been talking with our two kind of commentators, our partisan from two other from the campaign's people. We have current State House Rep T.J. Roberts, who's endorsed Daniel Cameron in this race, and we have former state senator and Republican Majority Leader Damon Thayer, who has endorsed Andy Barr in this race, as we're discussing through some issues. Now, we spent last segment talking about what people have the most that I've heard people attacking Daniel Cameron on, which is his winnability, electability. The biggest attack that I've heard on Andy Barr, at least parroted a fair amount, certainly by a candidate who's dropped out of the race, will still show up on your ballots, which is, what I call the idiot test. How many people are going to end up voting for a guy who's not even running anymore just because his name's on the ballot, right? But anyways, so Nate Morris has dropped out, and he's endorsed Andy Barr. But before that, he was really hitting him on the negative, on Amnesty Andy. That's what he kept calling him, Amnesty Andy. And we actually asked him about the attacks, Andy Barr, about those attacks. And I want to go ahead and play what he had to say in response. Let's go ahead. This is clip 38.
These false attacks against me that I'm for amnesty are absurd. They're absolutely not true. Again, I voted to triple ICE funding at the Department of Homeland Security, and it's resulted in self-deportations. It's resulted in over 600,000 deportations. And the president deserves an A+ because we have the lowest level of illegal border crossings in over 50 years in this country. And as a member of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition with China, this is a big deal. We saw a surge in illegal Chinese nationals, military-aged men, crossing the southern border under Biden's policies. I have a perfect A+ rating from Numbers USA, the leading border security and immigration enforcement organization in the country. And, oh, by the way, the president's head of border security in the country, the new Secretary of Homeland Security, Markwayne Mullin, has endorsed me in this race because he knows I'm the border security champion and immigration enforcement champion working with this president.
So there's his response to the claims that he's for amnesty for illegal immigrants. But, another thing we've seen people talking about is his support for H1B workers coming into the country. So like legal immigration, the concern about taking jobs from American citizens, his support for that in the past. Damon, what do you respond to people who are either just concerned about either legal immigration, him being for too much legal immigration, or even the people claiming, look, he's for amnesty for illegal immigrants?
Well, as you know, I'm a little bit of a grammar nerd, and one of my favorite words in politics is specious. An argument or claim that appears correct, plausible, or attractive at first glance, but is actually wrong, false, and lacks real merit. This was a specious claim by Nate Morris, and we all know what it got him. I mean, Andy Barr has pulled into the lead in this race. Nate Morris dropped out. So I don't think people really fell for the specious claim. I mean, you heard Congressman Barr defend his record. He is one of the most pro-Trump congressmen on the border that we could possibly have. And it was really a bad attack by Nate that didn't go anywhere. I mean, he was 6-7% in the polls, and then had to take a deal from the president to drop out of the race. So, I mean, it's good to talk about on a radio show, but it's just an absolutely false and specious claim. And I would rather move through this topic with alacrity, another one of my favorite words, to talk about something else, because it's not even, in my opinion, worth talking about. And the only reason it was is because a multimillionaire and his friends dumped a bunch of money into the race to attack Andy Barr, and it pretty much fell on deaf ears.
Well, Representative Roberts,
legal immigration is an important part of this country's history. And, my daughter's boyfriend is from the Philippines. And last August, he graduated from Middle Tennessee State University and became a U.S. citizen and is now an electrical engineer for one of the country's leading engineering companies. And this is part of America's history that when people go through the very vigorous and rigorous process to become U.S. citizens, we should welcome that. We shouldn't even really be talking about it. It's the illegal immigration that we need to crack down. And that's what Andy Barr's record has been in Congress.
So, Representative Roberts, I mean, Damon just said, look, this is completely false, made up claim, just something that Nate Morris had to say because he had to say something, has no legs, in other words. And, you know, concern about legal immigration is maybe overwrought, might be the word he'd use. But Representative Roberts, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, look, I understand why people have that concern. I'm not here to detract from Andy Barr's record. I mean, he's objectively correct. He voted to triple ICE funding. That said, we both can see that even as a state official, Daniel Cameron took significant action to help ensure that our wide open border under Joe Biden was sealed shut and America became an unwelcome place for illegal immigrants. And I'm thinking about in 2022, when he sued the Biden administration over their effort to terminate President Trump's regulations that were used to help crack down on illegal immigration. Daniel Cameron, along with 21 other state attorney generals, were able to file this suit in order to challenge the repeal of this. And the reality is both have taken their actions, but what we need is immigration hawks in our federal government. The fact is, illegal immigration has yielded disastrous results, whether it's the fentanyl crisis that we're facing here in Kentucky, whether it's violent crime issues. I can think about an incident that we just had where an illegal immigrant was arrested in Louisville, was released by pretrial services. He relocated to the Moorhead area and he killed a 15-year-old. It's an issue that fundamentally matters. And we do see, not saying Andy Barr, because he has not stated he supports this, but there are people who are trying to push amnesty in Congress, and they're doing it under the visage of what they call dignity. And we need people who are going to stand up for that, stand up for this idea that we are a nation of laws. Mm-hmm. You have to follow the law. And as Damon was saying, the people who have followed the law as it stands, they're welcome to stay. But we do need to look at these issues, such as the H-1B visa issue, because there have been massive H-1B fraud that almost never gets prosecuted. So that needs to be addressed. There needs to be a further crackdown. We are blessed that the Trump administration has gotten us to where illegal border crossings are at zero, but there's still millions upon millions of illegal immigrants within our borders, and we need to double down. And I'm confident Daniel Cameron is going to be an immigration hawk in the U.S. Senate. And if you don't believe me, you can take the word of the Center for Immigration Studies, who has a long time described Daniel Cameron as, and I quote, Kentucky's immigration hawk. The Center for Immigration Studies is very hardline on being anti-immigration and also including reducing the number of fraudulent legal immigration issues that we have in our country to ensure that if you're coming here, you're providing a net benefit to this nation.
And there's another question or another thing we ended up breaching a topic with when it came to Andy Barr that I know is causing a lot of consternation just across our state in general, and that's on data centers. Let's go ahead and take a listen. This is clip 29. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about data centers and as far as the consternation.
I believe in local control. I believe in local zoning and planning. And it's ultimately going to be a decision for local jurisdictions to decide whether or not they will cite an AI data center. In some places, it makes more sense than other places. Where we have pristine farm and productive farmland, it probably doesn't make sense. But on a reclaimed coal mine or on top of a sanitation site or a brownfield, it would make enormous amounts of sense.
And it would help and what you're saying is really with all the energy that we have, the resources, this is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, yes. And I applaud the president for saying that these data centers have to bring power of their own. And I think you could put nuclear and coal-fired power behind the meter. or gas behind the meter with these data centers. There's so much private capital being invested. They will bring their own power sources, and the data centers themselves can actually throttle up and be a supplier of power into the grid and help sustain and enhance our grid reliability, not detract from it, as long as there is behind the meter power sources that can contribute electricity to the grid.
So we see there some, I would call that maybe kind of a middle of the road. We've seen a lot of people, basically the ultimate not in my backyard, not wanting to see data centers in their backyard. And this is a point of concern when it comes to the federal government, just simply because we did recently see the Protect American AI Act that was a bill being considered within Congress, ended up getting pulled, that would have made it easier for data centers to essentially come into an area. The bill would have overrode some local control factors of it. But we do hear that consternation of concern about, hey, look, we need these data centers, but we're worried the locals in an area don't want to see them. Damon, you heard what Andy Barr had to say. Do you think he's somebody who's going to end up trying to override local control when it comes to those issues? Or if all the locals are saying no, what are we going to do?
I thought his answer was pretty good, actually. And, you know, there are some things the federal government should be involved in, and there are things that they shouldn't be. And I thought his answer was pretty spot on. Where it makes sense, you know, we're going to need these data centers. Of course, another big issue is we got to find, you know, the energy to make sure we've got good American energy from oil and gas to fuel these centers. But leave it up to the locals. I thought that was the appropriate answer.
Yeah. I just, you know, obviously, as I said, there's just some concern out there about, well, if the local governments keep saying no, right? But we'll come back here. We'll talk about something else, obviously looming in the race, and a current attack that Daniel Cameron has had on Andy Barr, that he's floated out there, that he's a part of the Mitch McConnell group, that Mitch McConnell's getting Andy Barr in there, and he and Andy Barr is a part of the McConnell machine. Obviously, that can be an attack that has a little bit of legs, just simply if you look at the approval rating when it comes to Senator Mitch McConnell currently. But we'll discuss that, play some clips of what they had to say, both of them, about Mitch McConnell there a few weeks ago. We'll have that when we come back on Kentucky's Voice. Stay with us here just over the next few minutes.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back on Kentucky's Voice. We're talking about the Senate race here in Kentucky. We're joined by Representative T.J. Roberts, who has endorsed Daniel Cameron, and former state senator and majority leader Damon Thayer, who has endorsed Andy Barr. Debbie Robbins is sitting second chair today with me the first hour. In the second hour, we'll talk a lot more. But while we have them on board, obviously a big thing looming over this race is who's going to replace McConnell. And, if we look at it factually, obviously, the approval rating of Mitch McConnell is kind of low. The fact that the current sitting senator's endorsement is not something anybody per se wants, at least speaks to how the public may feel about this. But we did ask both Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron about their views on Mitch McConnell. Here we have clip 1617. This is Cameron kind of back-to-back talking about McConnell.
I think, folks will obviously point to the fact that when it came to his decision not to hear the Merrick Garland nomination and not hear that in the Senate, obviously that was a big deal because we got out of that. Neil Gorsuch and a whole host of other conservative judges or justices that have allowed for a lot of good policy or case law to come out of the Supreme Court. And so I think that will be the hallmark of his legacy. And when it comes to, tenure in Washington, and we might get to this at some point, is I'm only going to serve 2 terms. I've said that pretty emphatically that, Mackenzie and I, this is a family decision that we've made. And, by the time I serve 2 terms, our oldest Theodore would be 17. His birthday's on January 2nd, and so he'll be 5 around the time that I'm sworn in, and so he would be 17 when I served 2 terms. And you miss some things during that period of time. We have, as a family, have made a decision to do that because we know that there's going to be some good policy that is passed in Washington that's going to impact our family and help our family just as much as the families across the Commonwealth. So we're confident in the decision, but 2 terms is enough. And
so there we go. He was talking a bit about Mitch McConnell, what he did that he viewed well with the courts and Merrick Garland, and then on top of that, discussing the length of time somebody should be in office, because obviously part of the knock is just McConnell's been in for a very long time. We asked Andy Barr about that too. This is clip 44 where he's talking a bit about Mitch McConnell.
We are losing influence. He was the Senate leader for a number of years. We're losing influence in the Senate. And so I think Kentucky Republicans have an important choice to make now. And I'm the only candidate in this race who actually has the experience to hit the ground running on day one. I don't have a learning curve. I'm doing the job now. I have existing relationships with this president, with this cabinet. I can call up members of the cabinet. I do talk to members of the cabinet routinely, whether it's Commerce Secretary Lutnick or Energy Secretary Wright or Transportation Secretary Duffy or EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Scott Bessent is the Treasury Secretary. I have jurisdiction over Scott Bessent. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee with jurisdiction over the Federal Reserve. I talked to the chairman of the Federal Reserve. I know Kevin Warsh, President Trump's new nominee to be the next chairman of the Fed. So I have existing experience and relationships. I have relationships with the senators. I've worked with many of them. I came into the Congress with many of them. I'm good friends with the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader. As I said, I was endorsed by Mark Wayne Mullen, the Secretary of Homeland Security. I've been endorsed by the Customs and Border Protection Agency that has been, populated by President Trump's appointments. Yeah.
So there you go. There's him talking about one of the things about Mitch McConnell was that he had influence within our government, within it, and then talking about how he can at least replace that influence because he has some of that influence because he has those relationships. But, one thing that I do have to say is that neither candidate is trying to embrace McConnell. McConnell's been used as an attack in this race. Damon, I mean, what do you think about Cameron's drawing now attention to the fact, saying that, hey, Andy Barr is the McConnell guy in this race? What do you think it says about McConnell's legacy, while at the same time also says about Andy Barr?
Well, there is going to be a time and a place as his term in the Senate comes to a close to discuss Mitch McConnell's legacy. And I will be happy to come back on your show and do that. But there is no doubt that we have punched above our weight as a smaller state with 8 electoral votes, while the country's been run by people from New York and California. We punched above our weight because of Mitch McConnell. And Andy Barr is the only one in this race who can sort of start getting us back to that because of the experience and connections that he has. But I would like to say I'm really disappointed in Daniel Cameron for taking this line of attack. I think it's desperate. Mitch McConnell made Daniel Cameron. Do you know why Daniel Cameron won the 2019 primary for Attorney General when people like Representative Roberts and me and the entire Senate Republican caucus were for Will Schroeder? It was because Mitch McConnell was behind him, and he fundraised for him, and he helped with his candidacy, and he advised, and he endorsed. He helped make Daniel Cameron what he is today. And for Daniel to flip on him and attack Andy Barr as if he's the Mitch handpicked candidate, which he's not, by the way, but to go on that attack and to attack Mitch McConnell, we saw that didn't work for Nate Morris, and I don't think it's going to work for Daniel Cameron.
And Representative Roberts, I mean, what do you think? Is Andy Barr the Mitch McConnell guy? Is he not? Is this attack by Cameron going to work? Is Cameron being disingenuous? What do you think?
I mean, Senator McConnell hasn't publicly said who he is voting for. If I had to guess, he is voting for Andy Barr, and that's for a multitude of reasons. And to the point of the attack, it's not a particular persuasive attack in my view. I'm less concerned about whom someone is supported by, and I'm more concerned about what that candidate actually supports. Look, I have 45,000 bosses. Over 16,000 people voted for me in November of 2024. And I don't know everything about every single one of those people. What I've wanted to see is more of the issues clash. I want to see more of the focus on what are going to be your priorities. And that's part of why I support Daniel Cameron, whether that be his advocacy for the constitutional rights of Kentuckians, even when everyone in Washington, D.C. is saying to stay out of it. When Andy Beshear had an 80% approval rating as he's threatening churchgoers, as he's banning interstate travel, banning protests against him while he himself was participating in protests that he agreed with, Daniel Cameron was on the front lines. And there were political institutions across the Commonwealth and across the nation telling him not to do that. He stood by and made sure that these rights were protected. When the city of Louisville, Kentucky's largest city, one of Kentucky's largest economic drivers, adopted an ordinance saying you can't pray outside of an abortion clinic. You can't peacefully protest. You can't have conversations that the abortion clinic disagrees with. Daniel Cameron joined in on the litigation there. His advocacy for life, one of those hot button issues that we had federal candidates refusing to go on the record on, even whenever we gained our majority. The Republicans surged, particularly in Northern Kentucky in the 1990s. It happened because of the life issue. And to that point, you've got to dance with the person who invited you in. And that's one of the reasons why, like, for me, the politics of personality, it doesn't sell me one way or the other. Who's voting for whom doesn't really sell me one way or the other. The issues are what matters to me. The priorities are what matter to me. And what I see here is we have a divided Republican Party, as all primaries fundamentally do, but I believe iron sharpens iron. And what I want to see is these folks, whoever wins, get together and get us to victory in November so Kentucky can continue to punch above its weight class. Because I'm of the opinion that both Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron, I've seen the network Daniel Cameron has in Washington, D.C. Kentucky's going to punch above its weight class with Daniel Cameron as well.
Well, I thank you both for your time as we were discussing these candidates. Stay with us, though, if you're a listener, into the second hour here, because we'll continue to discuss we'll just discuss the Senate race and these interviews we did with both of them and continue to go through outtakes and kind of take a look at this race, where it's laying at now.
And this discussion. These guys have been unbelievable supporters of their candidates. It's been
Absolutely.
great.
Yes, we will go through, too, as well, everything we've talked about this hour. But I thank you, Damon Thayer, for your time. And Representative Roberts, I thank you. I don't know if you're staying with us in the next hour, Roberts, but I thank you both for your time.
Thanks for having me. I have a lot of respect for Representative Roberts. He's exceeded my expectations in Frankfort. He's clearly one of the people who's gone to Frankfort to make a difference, not just make a point. I've watched, I'm impressed, and I'm sure no matter who wins the primary on May 19th, he and I will be united behind that candidate to make sure that we hold this seat just like it's been in Republican hands since Mitch McConnell first won it in 1984.
Absolutely. When he ran old D up a tree. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Representative Roberts. If you want to stay on, you can. We'll talk to you.
I will be on.
Absolutely.
We'd love it. Yeah.
Debbie.
Yes.
We've got about a minute left. What did you think so far?
I just want to thank both of these gentlemen for serving our state. I really do. It takes a lot of courage, no matter who the person is that's out there running for office. It really does. I mean, you take a lot of garbage. And gentlemen, thank you so much for what you've done and for just being great advocates for your candidates today. And, you know, I do have to throw in one thing. You know, Abraham Lincoln lost like 8 elections. So I don't think it's so much about that. I think it's, you know, what you learn. I think it's about authenticity and leadership. So we've got a great choice between the two on May 19th.
Well, we will be right back here on Kentucky's Voice, continuing to discuss into the second hour. We'll see you guys back here in a few short minutes.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back on Kentucky's Voice here in the second special hour. I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, joined in second chair by Debbie Robbins. Debbie?
Hey there, Andrew.
Hey.
It's been a great hour so far.
I know, right?
Wow.
We haven't talked much, but I also have Representative T.J. Roberts joining us into the second hour. Representative, thank you for continuing to give us your time.
Love it.
Thank you for allowing me to stay on.
And I believe we also have Dr. Lance Pearson joining us as well. Doctor, there you are. Hat and all. Hat and all. There we go. We got Dr. Lance on wearing the signature hat. Excited as ever to be here. So in that first hour, we really had a little bit of a back and forth regarding Andy Barr versus Daniel Cameron, looking at the clips, just reflecting on that first hour. TJ, you were in it. Dr. Pearson, were you watching the whole thing?
I was.
Okay. And Debbie, you're watching it. So I'd love to ask both Debbie and Lance. We'll start with you, Debbie. Your reflections on that. Did you think that the Cameron camp brought up good points? Did you think the Andy Barr camp brought up good points? What were your thoughts?
I think they both brought up good points. And for me, as a citizen, as a voter, as a professional communicator my entire life, I always look for authenticity, Andrew. I look for people that are real, that can relate. And I also look for, I've also coached a lot of candidates in the past, and I always ask them, do you want the job or do you want the position? Because if you want the position, if all you're worried about is, oh, I'm going to be the senator of or whatever, it kind of comes through and it doesn't ring well with people. But when they want the job and they've got the heart for it, that is what wins. Authenticity and leadership, of course. And for me, you know, I blew it yesterday. I mean, I pretty much laid out that Cameron really appeals to me in that way. I think he kind of he's always been an authentic person, and he's a great leader. And TJ pointed out, you know, he has fought some battles. Any person that has people on their lawn saying, I'm going to burn your house down, I'm going to kill you, and they're going to stand up, and they stand up no matter what, that's pretty impressive. Not to take away from Congressman Barr at all, but sometimes when I listen to him, I hear his resume, who he knows. And that doesn't mean he's not a good leader, but I want somebody in the fall that's going to be able to stand up to contrast what we're going to have a pretty radical opponent and just make it clear. And I thought you brought up a good point about race, even though Republicans, I think we're good at looking at the heart and not the color of the skin. I really do. And especially Christians, this program, we're Christian conservative, but boy, it'll be pretty amazing if we have two black candidates or African-American, whatever we're supposed to call them. I'm just people of color standing. That's going to be an amazing contrast. Not that Andy Barr can't hold his weight and win, but wow, I just think it's going to be interesting. That's my instant take there.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up about the resume side of things. You know, you look at it in that Andy Barr, and you do see some of the more traditional kind of, I've worked my way up, I've been groomed, I served in politics, I worked on in the governor's office, and then I became a congressman, and I've done that for these years, and now I'm becoming a senator. Like, that's
so it's my turn.
Yeah, that's the traditional resume for politics, and that does bring out some people that have some leadership qualities and ability to know the job. But also, there's some downsides with it. Dr. Pearson, you know, watching the last hour, what'd you think?
So first, I want to say I thought you did a great job moderating.
Yes.
I don't believe that it's necessarily easy to get T.J. Roberts and Damon Thayer in a room and agreeing on a lot of things that I thought were important to this campaign. One of the things that I thought was interesting was how much time Damon Thayer spent talking about how likely people were going to win or lose, whether it was going to be Cameron or Barr, when right at the beginning of his comments, he said that he thought either one of these candidates is going to be able to beat a Charles Booker, who's the most likely Democrat. So for me, that isn't really a big part of my calculation on who I'm voting for. I do believe if Andy Barr or Daniel Cameron win the Republican nominee, which, let's face it, it's going to be one of those two, I think they are going to beat Charles Booker, who has a literal socialist voting record. The only concern I have with the Charles Booker camp is that he has been building grassroots support, especially on the Democrat, but also independent side. And Daniel has done a better job of building out that grassroots support this cycle than Andy has. Remember, Daniel has run now 3 statewide campaigns that he's won, and also the one against Andy Beshear that he lost. Andy Barr has not run a statewide race at all. This is his first. So most of Kentucky is just familiarizing themselves with Andy Barr at this point. People know who Daniel Cameron is, and they like who Daniel Cameron is.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that is hanging over, though, the campaigns this year, and something where we have a real discussion about the general election is, in fact, and you can hide from this issue all you want to, and I understand you could say it's overblown or overwrought or, you know, people are being panicans. I don't care. Factually speaking, the Iran war more so because it's tying into high gas prices, and it does deal with a depression of a bit of the coalition of voters Trump put together. You know, we need to turn out all the people we can in November in order to win across the country, and those actions can certainly have some effect. And we actually did at the time. Now, this is what's interesting. At the time, we asked both these candidates about the Iran war. However, this was recorded like 3 weeks ago. And, we'll see how it translates. We'll see how it aged, okay?
Yeah.
So first, let's start with clip 39. Clip 39. This is Andy Barr talking about Iran here. Well, anyways, we will hit that clip up here in a second when we get it ready. There, as far as it goes, clip 39 and 40 we'll use for that one. And then for Cameron, we will use, let's see here, make sure we have these pulled up too as well, talking about it here. Iran and what's going on over there, because I do think it holds over it. I mean, Representative Roberts, I mean, you're out there. Obviously, you're in the 4th District. There's a big race going on there.
It's really shameful that we have the
and so the question is, do you think Iran holds over it pretty heavy?
I think it matters. And, whenever you had that 5 seconds of dead air on a federal candidate talking about the issues, I thought that was an interview with Ed Gowrine for a couple of seconds. But gas is $5 a gallon. That matters to people.
In Northern Kentucky, it is $5 a gallon. Yes, where you're at. Yes. I got to tell you, the weirdest thing, I live about an hour south. I can get gas for $3.89 there. And you guys are paying $4 a gallon. I know it. I saw it over the weekend. I just want to bring that up. Gas prices are wildly different across the board. You guys are paying $5. I'm paying $3.89. Up here in Louisville, it's $4.50.
Right.
It is all over the place. But go ahead, sir.
Right. And just think about it. Every dollar increment on the price of gas, that's an extra $13 to as much as $30 that you're spending every time you go to the pump. That has an impact on people who live paycheck to paycheck. And the number of people who live paycheck to paycheck, it is increasing more and more as the dollar continues to devalue. And yeah, that's demoralizing voters. And that's going to be something that whoever the Republican nominee is for the U.S. Senate race, they are going to have to reckon with that. And I think one of the better ways is how Thomas Massie has handled it, of being blunt, that if we are going to go to war, if we are going to be involved in foreign hostilities, Congress has to vote. Whether you support what's being done with Iran, I most certainly don't want hostile powers to have a nuclear weapon with ICBM capacity, obviously. But that being said, James Madison, the author of our Constitution, called the war declaration power being vested with Congress the greatest wisdom of the Constitution, of making sure that this is done by national consensus, because with the House of Representatives, the people get to hire or fire them every 2 years. And that ensures accountability whenever we make these decisions that will have an impact on the day-to-day life of every American. And just me personally, when I look at this, the average first-time home buyer, the lowest I've seen for the 2026 numbers is 40. The highest I've seen is 42. If we're on the high end, average first-time home buyer is just as old as my mother was when I turned 18. It's a devastating proposition, and we need federal representatives who are going to focus on their districts, focus on their states, and focus on the people in them. Being America first is being Americans first. And there's conversations to be had about foreign engagements that do indeed put America first. But that said, we have to understand the financial situation that the United States finds itself in. And we are staring down the barrel of one of the most massive recessions we're ever going to see if we don't get this under control.
And with that,
I hope that this is a success. But
yeah, and with that in mind, let's hear what Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron had to say. This was a few weeks ago
about
3 weeks
Iran.
Ago. This might be interesting. This is clip 39 and 40. Andy Barr talking about Iran. Let's take a listen.
Well, both Operation Midnight Hammer last June that obliterated Iran's nuclear infrastructure, in addition to Operation Epic Fury, they have been remarkable strategic successes for the United States and our allies. This president is not starting a war or did not start a war with Iran. He's ending a 47-year war. Remember, Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, responsible for murdering thousands of Americans over the last 47 years, taking Americans hostage, starting with the hostage taking at our embassy in 1979, the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut in the early 1980s, the bombing of the USS Cole, thousands of American service members maimed and killed by roadside bombs by Shiite militia groups in Iraq. And October 7th, Americans, in addition to Israelis, slaughtered and butchered by Iranian proxies Hamas. They have destabilized the region. They've aspired for a nuclear weapon. They are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. The Nazis concealed their intentions for the Jewish people. The mullahs in Tehran were telling us what they wanted to do to the Jewish people, annihilate them, take Israel off the map. But remember, in the same breath that they were promising to wipe Israel off the map, they were chanting death to America. Their nuclear warheads that they were developing, their ballistic missile capability that they were developing, it was not just for Israel. They were intending on building a nuclear umbrella to protect them, to allow them to export terrorism, and to threaten our homeland with an intercontinental ballistic missile and nuclear weapon. So this operation, which has been a remarkable success, which has taken out over 12,300 missile, drone, aircraft, naval, military assets of the Iranian regime, has been a remarkable success. In addition to degrading their military capabilities, this operation, Epic Fury, is also degrading the defense industrial base so that the Iranian regime, the successor regime, also hardline, will not be able to reconstitute easily. The last phase of this is, of course, to secure the Strait of Hormuz, to settle the energy markets. Gas prices are up temporarily, but in the long run, securing the strait without a military-capable Iran will lead to more stable global energy markets in the long run.
So that was a few weeks ago. Dr. Pearson, how'd you think it aged?
Ultimately, I don't see a quick end to these hostilities. So declaring victory 3 weeks ago doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, everyone agrees that much of the military capability of Iran has been eroded. But for me, our engagement in Iran comes down to this. Is the regime that's going to replace the old Ayatollah going to be any more favorable towards us or not? And instead of the people of Iran that are behind the regime having animosity towards the U.S. about something that happened 50 years ago, now they have animosity towards the U.S. about something that happened this year. So I'm not a great fan of this whole engagement, and I think it is going to continue to have significant economic impacts on the everyday Kentuckian, and I think that's really what it comes down to. But I'm not sure that this is a point at which Barr and Cameron really have massive differences.
Well, let's find out. Let's find out. Okay, here's a 30-second clip of what Cameron had to say about the goal and Iran, and just briefly talking about Iran. This is clip 18. Let's go ahead and take a listen to it.
The overall goal is to decimate the leadership there that has been fomenting terrorism on our people since the late 1970s. It's to incapacitate, which they've pretty done successfully, their naval capabilities, their ballistics capabilities, and to go a step further and stop them from enriching uranium, which has been a great concern and fear for previous administrations. This is just the first president to actually have the nerve and the fortitude to be willing to do it.
Debbie, does it sound to you like there's much daylight between them on the issue, or do they have difference of opinions? And how have the clips aged?
I don't think there's much difference in their opinions. And telling my age here now, I grew up with a great fear of Iran. I grew up with that. And so I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
I used to fear Iran too, so I started running. And then
all right.
I'm kidding. That was a horrible joke. I'm sorry. That was the dumbest thing I've said in weeks.
But no. So to me, I'm thrilled, and I think Andy Barr pointed out everything. You know, the Iranians, the Jewish connection, the whole thing. And it's only been 6 weeks, and I know Donald Trump's leadership of the past 10 years. This man is gonna get it done. The people, you either have to believe in the people that he has around him, and I do. I think he has the most phenomenal historic cabinet in the history of America. And I also believe that either one of these gentlemen, when they get to the Senate, they're going to be a great person of wisdom. They're going to listen. And so I don't think there's much aging, except that we're all impatient. You all grew up in the era of, the cell phones and all that stuff. I didn't. So I'm used to being a little bit more patient and waiting.
Yeah,
6 weeks isn't long for me.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think we're coming up on a break. We can talk about how that plays into it there with those clips. Because I think there's an interesting point that I want to make there. There's an interesting point I want to make. I'm going to make a point when we get back here.
As long as it's not wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, it's not going to be a dumb
It'd be great.
But when we get back here on Kentucky's Voice, we'll be continuing in this special 2-hour show, discussing the Senate race, discussing the interviews they did here on Kentucky's Voice. We'll be back here soon.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back on Kentucky's Voice, your source for Kentucky politics. We're going through with a few guests here. We have Dr. Lance Pearson, Debbie Robbins, and Representative T.J. Roberts here. We're going through the Andy Barr and Daniel Cameron election. Now it's basically those two. As I said, it used to be Nate Morris. He dropped out. And so we're going through the interviews of Daniel Cameron and Andy Barr. I got to admit, I'm a little upset at Nate Morris for dropping out because I did the Nate Morris interview. So none of these clips have me in it, and it's Nate Morris's fault. But anyways.
But you're here now, and you're amazing
That's
today.
Right. I'm handling
You are
this.
on it.
But before the break, Debbie, you'd brought up about Iran war and generation being impatient. And I agree, I disagree, right?
Okay.
I agree that, relatively speaking, the term this has taken not that long. Relatively speaking, it doesn't seem every life is a problem, but there's not a lot of loss of life. You're true. I think the impatience, though, is we went through 4 years of gas prices under Biden.
Yes.
And then we got 6 months where some of us made bad decisions, like buying a vehicle that takes premium gas in that time frame too. if I'm to be honest, and a diesel truck. Anyway, so
see, we're my generation. We drive our cars till they die, and we keep them maintained.
That's
That's how I understand, though.
Yeah,
I have a 21-year-old
cost
son.
More. But anyways, point is that we had that 6 month, let's say 7 month reprieve where we saw gas prices could immediately get low. It immediately took the legs out of any idea that the president has no control, and then they shot back up. And so I understand the claim of impatience, but I think realistically we do have to look at it as a campaign issue in this election. To do so would just be to Biden ourselves, where they sat there trying to convince us the economy is great, the gas prices are good, you're fine, you're loving it, you just don't realize it yet. And that did not turn out well for the Biden administration. And if the Trump administration continues to go down a path of ignoring it or trying to tell us it's good when it's not, I think it risks coming off the same way.
I think the one thing we cannot accuse Trump of is not telling us what's on his mind. Because he tells us the way it is every day.
And I think sometimes
but you're right.
Us.
Yes, but you are right on the local and state levels. It's up to these candidates. Whoever comes out of this race, out of these,
they got to drive out.
When we choose our team, the team better be on it. I agree, and be forthright. Be authentic. Tell them the truth. I think you are absolutely right about that.
And so a part of that, though, is obviously as we're vetting candidates trying to figure it out. We have this clip here where Daniel Cameron's talking about what sets him apart, what makes him different than Andy Barr in this interviews we did. This is clip 13. Clip 13. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
Big thing is track record. Somebody who based on a level of trust that you have in that individual because of the things that they've already done. And when I was Attorney General, I stood strongly for our constitutional rights and helped get our churches reopened after 9 days when we had a governor that wanted to shut those down. I went into federal court and got the travel restriction that told you that if you left the state, you had to quarantine for a period of 14 days. We got that overturned and struck down here in Kentucky. And when it came to standing firm for our law enforcement community, which in that moment could have been challenging and difficult, we took the courageous stand and did what was right, even though people were protesting on our front lawn and saying they were going to burn our house down and all that sort of thing. And so I've demonstrated through a track record that I'm willing to do the difficult things to stand firm for our common sense conservative values. And I want to take that to the United States Senate, that approach of standing firm for our 120 counties and fighting for those values. And again, this is a race that's going to be largely about track record. Who do you trust to make a judgment and decision in Washington that's going to best benefit our families? And who do you trust to walk alongside you as the next United States Senator from Kentucky? And that's the case that I'm making to the voters here.
And so there we go. Daniel Cameron's talking about his track record as far as it goes, and talking about how his track record is better than anybody else's. But Andy Barr, we've seen also touting around his track record. Let me ask you, TJ, this is a essentially a two-pony race. I know that obviously there's a group of people out there that support a third candidate that are upset that we don't mention all other 8 candidates that are running, but we're talking about those who, relatively speaking, have at least a polling above, let's say, 15%. That is we're talking about. And so we have essentially a two-pony race here going on in these final 2 weeks. Will the record claim that Cameron was saying several weeks ago still continue to hold out when it comes against Andy Barr, who, as Damon was saying when he was here with us in the last hour, Andy Barr does have a record?
Yeah, Andrew, I think that it will. I mean, when I think about the track record that Daniel Cameron has, he has the track record for the Main Street American. He has the track record of ensuring that you could go to church without persecution. And that matters particularly to me. I was the person that led as the plaintiff in the lawsuit against Andy Beshear for closing our churches, having state police harass us, having criminal prosecution threatened against us. And when I think about these issues, when I think about what's happening in Kentucky versus what's happening in DC, you can have a candidate that has fought to ensure that those issues that really matter, that husband, wife, child, grandparent, that they're going to be talking about it at night. Look, despite the affordability crisis, the numbers on the screen look really good with the stock market, but does that really tell you about the health of the people themselves? Daniel Cameron taking steps to ensure that you had the right to advocate for the preborn. Daniel Cameron taking steps to ensure that our Commonwealth wasn't flooded with illegal immigrants entirely at the behest of Joe Biden. These are those types of issues that I think stand out for people, that show a pathway to victory, of that, as I was saying before, that come home America sensibility of understanding that the American needs to be at the forefront of people's conversations, not to detract from Andy Barr's accomplishments in Congress. Mine and Kim Mosier's House Bill 1. It wouldn't have happened without his contributions to the big, beautiful bill to ensure that the school choice tax credit was in there. So there are significant accomplishments. But what I need to be clear on is that at those first fundamental principles, faith, family, freedom, Daniel Cameron had that track record, and he stood for those issues even when they were incredibly unpopular. When I sued Andy Beshear, his approval rating was 80%. Thank God Daniel Cameron didn't care about approval ratings.
Yeah. Dr. Pearson, I mean, just from a sheer analytical side of things, you have obviously this two-man race, and Cameron's talking about track record. Andy Barr is also pointing at his track record, saying, look, I've got a great track record here. Do you think Daniel Cameron can hold water there in the track record side of things, considering, Barr saying, look, I've been in Congress, I've voted in federal government, and Cameron's never been a legislator?
Well, I mean, it's certainly true that Daniel Cameron has never been a legislator, but this takes off on a point that Damon Thayer was making, and it was talking about how Andy Barr is battle tested, and Andy Barr has been running for the last 2 months ads on nothing other than Trump called me a warrior. That's been the only message that he's had. Hasn't been talking about policy. And so for me, I cannot name any votes that Andy Barr has taken in Congress that I would consider really difficult votes. I just can't, off the top of my head, I can't name a single one. Battle tested is when you're the attorney general, you have to make a ruling based on state law that some police officers basically acted within their legitimate authority, and therefore they couldn't be prosecuted, and faced people coming to his house, being on, threatening to kill him, threatening to burn down his house. That is battle tested, and I have no doubt that the most battle tested and the most electorally tested candidate in this race is Daniel Cameron.
Well, when we come back, we'll hear Andy Barr talking about his record. Stay with us here on Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
You're back on this very special show of Kentucky's Voice here in the second hour, joined by a few different people as we take a look at this Senate race and take a look at the interviews they did here on Kentucky's Voice with us, joined by Debbie Robbins, Dr. Lance Pearson, and State House Representative TJ Roberts. And we were talking about how a thing that Cameron said set him apart was his record in the interview with us last segment. And, I brought up and we were discussing about, Andy Barr does have a record voting in Congress. And is it hard for him to make that argument? And we pointed to things that he did as Attorney General that does speak to his record. But let's hear from Andy Barr what he has to say about his record. So this is clips 33, 34, and 35. Don't worry, guys. It sounds like a lot, but it's really just about 3 minutes of Andy Barr talking about his record. Let's take a listen to that.
Well, I think the consistency issue is with the organizations. The organizations need to be consistent about how they're scoring these measures, because I'm consistent. I'm consistent on fiscal responsibility, on pro-life issues, on energy dominance, on deregulation. So I voted for it, but in scoring, it depends on what you're voting. You're scoring. Some of these organizations will score a vote for national security as a liberal vote. I don't see it that way. I'm for a strong national defense. I was raised in the era of Ronald Reagan. And for the life of me, I don't know why a so-called conservative organization would score a vote for, say, the National Defense Authorization Act or a vote for defense appropriations as a liberal vote. And yet some of these organizations will do that. But on fiscal responsibility, I'm the only candidate in this race who has actually co-sponsored a balanced budget amendment and voted for it. I'm the only candidate in this race who's voted for mandatory spending reform at the federal level, saving trillions of dollars. I'm the only the only candidate in this race who's a member of the Doge Caucus and voted for major rescissions packages. I'm the only member of, I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually, as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, dismantled wasteful foreign aid by reforming USAID and blocking woke and wasteful programs that actually undermine our national security. So I take a backseat to no one when it comes to cutting wasteful spending, advancing fiscal responsibility. And yes, sometimes I vote to raise the debt limit, but to avoid a default, which would be worse for our debt overall, but only when it's accompanied by reforms. By either mandatory, recurring, compounding mandatory spending reforms or spending cuts as part of raising the debt limit to avoid a default. A default would actually cost the taxpayer more money. And as a member of the Financial Services Committee, we're doing things to strengthen the dollar's dominance and make sure the dollar remains the world's reserve currency and increase demand for treasuries and stabilize the treasury market given the huge debt load that we have. I have led the fight to decrease burdensome regulations on banks, to increase their capacity to hold Treasury securities, to stabilize our debt and deficit situation. And I've supported legislation to make the United States the world crypto leader on planet Earth, to make sure that stable coins are backed by U.S. dollars, to increase demand for treasuries, to lower interest rates, and to make sure that the dollar remains the world's reserve currency.
He said something in there I have a hard time believing. And I could be mistaken, and I know some of you pay more attention to federal politics than I do. I'm big on state politics. So when it comes to debt ceiling, right, increases, he said in there that he's only ever voted for a debt ceiling increase when it has restructured spending or something along those lines to help affect the fact that we're going into debt. And the reason why I ask questions about that is just because, and look, I'm just a layman, and so somebody can explain it to me. But over the last 12, 14 years that he's been in Congress, our debt has gone up. And he's voted for the debt increases several times, at least more than once or twice or three times. And our debt's going up, and our deficit's growing. Like our debt's going up faster and faster and faster. Can someone explain? Has he only ever voted for debt increases when there's reforms involved?
I don't have the answer to that question, but I do have the same. To me, if you're somebody who's strong and you're going to stand up, even in the middle of the Biden administration, because, we were in the minority, then vote against it, even if you're going to lose. If you're really that principled, that's what I felt. The same thing. I think that's what is that what you're saying? Because
your initial inclination when you hear that is to be like, I don't know. Representative Roberts, is that the case?
It is true that every time there's been a clean bill on just raising the debt ceiling, Andy Barr did vote no. But whenever there have been adjustment provisions, he has voted yes. And the most recent instance that I can immediately think of was the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. And that's what he was talking about in terms of the adjustment. And the specific adjustment that they had was actually something that Congressman Thomas Massie proposed in the Rules Committee. In my view, it was a brilliant provision that made to where
but that provision didn't go into place.
Correct. And the way that this happened was this. It made it to where the debt ceiling was raised, but Congress is to start doing 12 separate bills instead of omnibus spending bills.
And there's an automatic cut on CRs in that, right? On continuing resolutions.
Precisely. And that's where the problem came in. Congress ultimately lied, and they just do continuing resolutions. So we're still at Biden's level of spending. And as a result, they have completely gutted this issue.
So what you're saying is that, for an example, he voted for a debt ceiling increase that mandated a future cut in CRs, but then, so that's the reform he's talking about. But then when the CRs came up, he still voted for them even if they didn't have the reduction in spending.
Right, and that's the entire problem with it is that the CR, and these were automatic CRs, so they would just pass CRs to keep them at the same level, and that's one of those problems is the doublespeak in Washington D.C. because killing that 1% spending cut was one of Mike Johnson's biggest agenda items, and it's insane to me that we can't even get a 1% spending cut when we have a Republican majority. It's nonsensical to me. I mean, we're talking about the debt, and we have to realize the federal government is living far beyond their means. It's embarrassing. And we look to that issue. And yes, it is true that there was a balanced budget amendment on a recent budget item. Your problem with it is that the vote threshold to override the balanced budget requirement is 2/3. And the problem is the uniparty always gets to that 2/3 threshold. And so the budget ultimately doesn't get balanced with that. There needs to be a strong balanced budget amendment that sort of like what we have in Kentucky that constitutionally requires it with no vote threshold to override it.
Yeah. Interesting that, I look at that. He said at the beginning, he was talking about the rating organizations and how they're inconsistent calling something like voting for the National Defense Authorization Act liberal when he doesn't view it as liberal. Dr. Pearson, when we started off hearing about that, what did you think to yourself hearing him talk about the National Defense Authorization Act being a conservative piece of legislation and not being a liberal one like some of these liberty rating organizations or conservative rating organizations were calling it?
Well, the reality is it's not a significant portion of any of these ratings, whether or not you voted for that. The National Defense Authorization Act, I think, is passed for like the last 80 years consecutive. It's one of the few pieces of legislation that always moves. So, like, if any of these organizations he's talking about is scoring on that, it's a very small part of the score. The reality is Conservative Review has graded Andy Barr's overall lifetime score as a 57 and an F rating. He is not a conservative. Now, he's certainly going to be better than Charles Booker. If he happens to win this primary, I have zero qualms about voting for Andy Barr. But I believe that Daniel Cameron is a legitimate conservative. If he gets this seat and they start scoring
let me pause
him,
you there
I
for a
expect
second.
he'll be a B or an A.
Yeah, let me pause you there for a second because I think it's important because you just said that Andy Barr would be a liberal and Daniel Cameron would be a conservative.
I wouldn't say liberal. I would say moderate.
Moderate.
Yeah.
Would be a moderate. He's not a conservative, and Daniel Cameron is. Let's define that term. What do you define as a conservative as you're describing it? So people understand when you say Cameron's a conservative, Barr's not. What does that mean to you, Dr. Pearson?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. Number one, I want you to be a budget hawk, a legitimate fiscal conservative. Mm-hmm. The reality is Andy Barr has been in office for 14 years. During that period, we have gone through the largest expansion of national debt in our history by multiples. So, I mean, if your biggest issue is we are passing on now $371,000 of debt to our children for every taxpayer, that's the current level of national debt. Andy Barr has to take a little responsibility for it because every single time that a Republican is in office, he votes for that budget bill with no discussion on the floor about pushback on the levels of spending. So the first issue there is, what are you making decisions on in terms of budget? He has not received the recommendation, the endorsement of Kentucky Right to Life. I don't think that he is a pro-choice person. Don't get me wrong. He's just of the, he's of the I'm pro-life position that there are various exemptions. The only piece of legislation that he has ever been part of that related to abortion has been being willing to endorse a 15-week ban on it at the federal level, which is the most bare bones. That's the minimum that I would say that we could possibly achieve as conservatives. So just on issue after issue, he's taken not a liberal position. I don't think he's a liberal. I just think he's much more moderate than I'm comfortable with. And I'm ready to take a different direction.
Yeah. Well, we'll dig into that, too, because you brought up right to life issues. We have some clips where both Daniel Cameron and Andy Barr were asked where they stand on the issue of life. We'll go ahead and discuss that.
May I jump in and just say that Cameron's one-liner about him is that he goes along to get along. Those are Cameron's words.
Well, we'll get some final thoughts here, too, when we go into the final segment from each of us. So we'll have all that and more when we come back here. Stay with us. We're coming up on just a 2-minute break here into the final segment of this special 2-hour episode of Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And you're back on this final segment of Kentucky's Voice, joined by Debbie Robbins, TJ Roberts, and Dr. Lance Pearson. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooper-Ryder, here talking about that Senate race. We've been going through some clips from when they were interviewing with us here on Kentucky's Voice and going back through and kind of just doing some analysis on it. And one of the things that we wanted to go ahead and talk about, and we breached there in the last segment, was about abortion. And we did ask them about their pro-life stances here. Let's go ahead and play those clips of them talking about abortion. This is clips 41 and 19. 41, the first one will be Andy Barr, and 19, Daniel Cameron. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
I continue to push pro-life policies, as I have all 14 years of my time in Congress at the federal level, including my support for the Hyde Amendment to prevent taxpayer funding of abortions, prohibitions on certainly late-term abortions, partial birth abortions. I've been a co-sponsor and tireless advocate for the Born Alive Protection Act, which requires doctors and healthcare professionals to provide medical care to babies born alive in the course of abortions.
Well, on the baby boxes front, I mean, I think Kentucky can be a national model. And whether it's my friend Nancy Tate over in Meade County or Adia Wuchner, who have fought pretty heavily on that front, that's certainly Kentucky can be a national model, and I would advocate for such in the United States Senate. The other thing I'll say as it relates to, the abortion pill, there have been studies that have shown that it can be a significant harm to women. And one of the things that happened during the Biden administration is they dropped what is referred to as the REMS, the regulations around receiving that medicine. You used to have to do certain things. And so I would be in support of restoring the regulations that were around that originally anyways. And I think that is obviously something that is important to securing the safety for women on this particular issue. But on baby boxes, I think that Kentucky, again, can be a model for the rest of the nation. And I would work to ensure that that is an opportunity that comes before the Senate.
I think that these pro-life issues too, as well, especially those who, as campaigns have come down to more of like just who's the Trumpiest Trumper to have ever trumpeted, and that's what you'll see. I mean, that's what most of our campaigns now are all about. Who's the most Trumpist? State house race. It doesn't matter. They're going to send out a mailer with Trump on it and say they're more Trump than the other guy who's less Trump than they are Trump. But anyways, the point is that's what a lot of campaigns have come down to. But I think that's important to discuss when it comes to pro-life issues, because just frankly speaking, we know that while for the pro-life cause, we do thank Donald Trump for giving us the Supreme Court justices that led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Trump himself has a pretty dim view on the issue of right to life. It seems like he's not really for he wants the issue to basically go away. He views it as a political liability to Republicans, at least. That's what I mean by dim view. He doesn't think it's a winning issue, and so he doesn't want to talk about it, and he wished Republicans would stop talking about it. And there's a lot of evidence we can point to on that, one being the fact that there was probably a significantly better candidate than Ed Gowron that was available in the 4th District, and Trump and them had a falling out because Trump wanted them to have a different stance on right to life, and they're like, no, I'm 100% pro-life, finally believe in case of life for the mother, that's who I am, and just, Trump wasn't happy about that, and so he decided he didn't want him because he would lose, because he doesn't understand what the 4th District is. But anyways, putting that to the side, and so when you have these candidates talking about that, it is important to talk to them about where they stand on the pro-life issues. And something Cameron mentioned, and I have to say this is kind of a bit of a knock, I guess, on Cameron, is he mentions that regulations Biden's put in place, that Biden took off these abortion pills that are harmful to women, and how he'd be in favor of putting them back on. But he never mentions that Trump could just put them back on if he wanted to, if that makes sense. He's not calling on Trump to do it. He's kind of obfuscating the fact that Trump is continuing to not put those regulations back on those pills. And, I wonder about that side of things. Does that make sense, guys? I'm talking about in politics here, where it
Well,
just
I
seems
want
like
to say, as the female of the group
Yeah.
today, and a lady who had my one and only baby in midlife, and I will never quit touting it because it was a miracle. I appreciate Daniel Cameron's viewpoint. I don't think he had an opportunity to really explain himself there, Andrew. I think he would probably agree with you on that. But I just looked up Daniel's name, what it meant during the break. It means God is my judge. And I've never met a politician like Daniel Cameron, a man who has the courage to stand for the word of God. And we are Kentucky's voice. We are the conservative Christian voice. So what I want to say to everyone out there, when you're looking at these two men, which man is going to stand for the word? Who's going to walk in the word of God? Who's going to walk in faith? He's the only politician in my lifetime that I've ever seen have a campaign commercial that said, I am a Christ follower. Can you name any other politician in the United States of America ever who said that out loud? The only one I can even come second close would be Mike Huckabee. But he got in trouble because he had a campaign ad where in the background a bookshelf looked like a cross. So he had to explain that it wasn't planned. But Daniel has courage, and I heard him speak at the pro-life event here for Preborn, and he was with Dr. Albert Mohler and Bob Russell, two of the most phenomenal speakers in the United States. And Daniel just blew us all away with his compassion, his love for life. I really felt like the man would lay down his life for a baby, for a child. And I just want somebody who doesn't worry about what other people think. You know, I always think about that too. If you only knew how little people think of you, you wouldn't worry about what other people think. And I think he's one of those who really, at the end of the day, doesn't
Debbie.
worry about it.
Now, Debbie.
Andrew.
He's a politician.
Yes.
Literally, his entire job is to care about what people think about him. That's the only way he gets to hold office.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're at the end of the day at night, when you go to sleep at night. And who do I want? We are so lack
if you can say that's not where he's going to find his self-worth.
Right, yes, that's what I mean.
But to say a politician doesn't care what people think about him,
I know what
denies the reality of what they're doing with their life.
Exactly.
Yes,
But standing for truth.
Go ahead, Dr.
Andrew,
Pearson.
Bringing it back to the abortion topic that we were talking about, I found it interesting that Daniel Cameron was the only one of the three candidates that we interviewed that actually mentioned abortion pills. That is where the real fight on the abortion issue is.
Right.
In fact, even in Kentucky, there are estimates that say that we have actually increased in the number of abortions in Kentucky, even after we have passed a really strong ban because of the prevalence of these abortion pills. And TJ Roberts, if you want to go to him, Andrew, I would suggest it. He actually sponsored legislation to kind of start regulating this at the state level, abortion pills.
Well, Dr. Lance called on you, TJ.
Sure.
I mean, when you look at the answers on the life issues, does Cameron actually have an edge there, or are they basically parroting the same thing?
I think Cameron absolutely has the edge on the abortion issue. And look, Andrew, to your point about politicians caring about what people think, yes, that's a factor that we all consider. But there are some issues that I would rather lose than compromise on.
Right.
And one of those issues is the ability of a baby to be born so it can have a life outside the womb. Because that baby, from the moment it is conceived, it is a living human being.
Right.
And the circumstances of your conception, that doesn't change that whatsoever. And when I look at the absolute demonic perspective of the pro-abortion lobby and the borderline terrorism that is being inflicted on the preborn and their mothers, by the way, through the abortion pill.
Exactly.
It's astonishing to me. Now, to play devil's advocate on the Trump administration side of things, they have to go through the Administrative Procedure Act in order to re-implement the regulations. And that's why you see the regulations have been reinstated by a federal court recently. The Fifth Circuit just did that. And the reason for that was that Biden didn't follow the Procedure Act.
Mm-hmm.
And to this point, though, I sponsored House Bill 316 in 2025. And if I'm being blunt, I'm drawing a blank on what the bill number was in 2026 that I primary co-sponsored with Nancy Tate. We filed legislation to make it a felony to import the abortion pill into Kentucky with the intent of procuring an abortion for a pregnant woman. And the reason we did that is It's as simple as this. We have a very good abortion ban in Kentucky, but without that importation issue, the trafficking is not going to stop. Babies are going to continue to die. And the fact is this, that is the issue that got Catholics to switch from Democrat to Republican.
Yeah.
The issue.
Yeah.
We cannot win unless there is a united Christian front. And if you care about what people think, you should be answering the questions about where you stand on the right to life. And there's a reason Daniel Cameron's endorsed by Kentucky Right to Life.
Yeah.
Whether it was standing up for the Sisters for Life, whether it was fighting for Kentucky's pro-life laws, for going on the record and saying, if you were conceived in rape, if you were conceived in incest, that is your father's sin. That is not your sin.
Yeah.
You have value as a human being.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Let's real quick. Final thoughts. Okay. Realistically, and in like 15 seconds, say why. Dr. Pearson, who's going to win here on May, was it 19th, 20th, whatever? About 2 weeks away. Who's going to win? Daniel Cameron, Andy Barr, 10 seconds as to why. Go.
I would honestly say that Andy Barr is the favorite right now, only because of that Trump endorsement. There's a lot of low information voters that only pick based on that. I think the better candidate is Daniel Cameron, and he does have a very good chance to still win. If people turn out and are passionate, you can win, because this is a turnout election now.
So Dr. Pearson says,
on your side are you going to turn out?
Andy Barr's going to win. TJ Roberts, where are you at?
Yeah, I think people are going to go with who they know. The biggest drawback for Andy Barr is that his name ID was, at least before announcing his run for USN, largely secured to the 6th district and the political classes across the Commonwealth. The everyday voter, they know who Daniel Cameron is. They know his heart. They know his faith. They know his family. They know where he stands. And there is a familiarity aspect as well. They're also familiar with the fact that in 2023, Daniel Cameron had President Trump's endorsement too. So I think it's actually far closer either way.
TJ Roberts, you're saying Daniel Cameron
in the Senate. Yes.
You're saying Daniel Cameron. Debbie?
Daniel Cameron, and that is if Christians get out and vote and you use your common sense and we pray. PUSH, pray until something happens. Daniel.
I'm going to say Andy Barr because I'm a nihilist and I think that voters care more about money and endorsement and they care too much, and that'll be what it comes down to.
Daniel.